She worked hard to keep her mother quiet, until the half-Apache man gave $50. The golden pocket watch hit the floor without a sound anyone would remember. Glass split under the heel of Jasper Harris's boot and slid across the boards. The hands stopped where they were. Mabel Harris was still holding her mother's arm. Jasper Harris looked down at the watch. He did not curse. He did not even say a word. He knelt, picked it up, and closed the case with his thumb. Mabel saw the broken watch, but she did not yet know that she was standing inside a moment that would rearrange her entire life. Jasper slid the watch into his coat pocket. It was the same pocket where it always went before he left for the mine. Then he looked at his daughter.
You're no different from your mother. You only break things.
And that was the last thing she ever heard from her father. If you're curious about what has brought Mabel to this point, let me take you back to where it all began. In the 1870s, when Virginia City still worked, it did so with noise. Wagons crowded the streets from early morning. Boots struck the boards in uneven rhythms. Men lined up outside the mine office before the sun cleared the ridge. The town did not promise much, but it kept its word to those who showed up. Jasper Harris showed up. He left the house before Mabel woke and returned when the light was already low. Dust clung to his cuffs and the creases of his neck. There were times dust even stuck in his hair and ears. He washed at the basin by the door and sat down without comment. He ate what was set in front of him. He only spoke when he asked for more coffee or when he would be working the late shift again. Jasper Harris never complained or raised his voice. He did whatever a man needed to do to provide for his family, and Maggie kept the house in order. She swept the floor. She cooked for her husband the same meals she had learned from her own mother. Meat stretched thin, potatoes boiled soft. She did all the things that a modest wife would typically do. On the shelf by the stove sat a small bottle with a paper label. She took from it when her hands shook or when sleep came apart in the middle of the night. She said it helped her rest. She said it kept the headaches away. Mabel watched her mother the way children do when they learn the limits of a room. She noticed the pauses, the way Maggie sometimes stopped mid-task and stared at nothing for a little too long, or the way she forgot the kettle on the stove once and filled the house with steam. Jasper said nothing then. He lifted the kettle, set it aside, and went to wash his hands. Life moved on. On Saturdays, Mabel walked to the edge of town with other children and watched the wagons roll in. She liked the sound of the harness and the smell of leather. She liked that the street was full enough that no one paid her any mind. The town felt larger then, less personal. One thing she learned early was that crowded places were safer inside the house. Maggie's moods shifted without warning. Some evenings she talked too much, words tumbling out of her as she moved from room to room. Other nights she sat silent, eyes unfocused, the bottle close at hand. Jasper began coming home later. When he did, he took his plate to the table and ate without looking up. If Maggie spoke sharply, he let it pass. If she forgot something, he fixed it and moved on. Mabel understood this as order. It made sense to her that things were handled quietly, that discomfort was well managed, and no one seemed to want to address it. She learned to read the air in a room and adjust herself to it. She stayed out of the way. She did what was asked before it had to be asked twice. The town shifted slowly. It was not announced. One week, there were fewer men outside the mine office. Another week, a shop closed early and did not open again. The talk in the streets changed. Men spoke of seams thinning, of work moving deeper, of accidents that took longer to clean up. Jasper came home tired in a way that sleep could not seem to fix. Maggie began to take from the bottle more often. She said the days were long. She said her head felt full. When Mabel asked if she was unwell, Maggie laughed and told her not to fuss. Jasper listened from the other room and said nothing. Dinner grew later, then smaller. Jasper's boots stayed by the door longer, untouched. His moments of silence got longer. When he did speak, it was to say that things would turn, as they always did. Mabel believed him because she had nothing else to believe. One night, Maggie did not rise from the chair when Jasper came in. Her eyes were half closed. Her words ran together. Jasper stood in the doorway longer than usual. He didn't shout. He didn't touch her then. He just went to the shelf and set the bottle farther back, out of easy reach. Maggie noticed and swore at him, sharp and sudden. Mabel froze where she stood. Jasper took off his coat and hung it by the door. He washed his hands. He sat down. The moment passed without resolution, which only meant it had been delayed. Mabel was starting to understand how a house could hold bodies, but not keep hearts aligned. Each day carried more weight, but no real support. Small allowances grew into routines, and routines settled into permanence. By the late 1870s, Virginia City did not suddenly collapse, but everyone could feel the hardship and the economic downturn. The mine office opened later. Some mornings the line did not reach the corner anymore. Men stood apart instead of shoulder to shoulder. Hands in pockets, eyes on the ground. A shop closed and left its sign hanging. Another kept its door open but stopped restocking the shelves. Jasper felt the change before he spoke of it. He came home with less dust on his clothes and more weight in his shoulders. Some days he was sent back before noon. Other days he waited hours for an assignment that never came. When he sat at the table, he stared at his hands longer than the plate in front of him. Maggie noticed the difference in her own way. She began to measure her bottle by the week instead of the day. When it ran low, her patience did too. Her words sharpened. She accused Jasper of withholding, of watching her suffer. He did not argue. He stood by the door and listened until the sound of her voice became something he could step around. Mabel watched them both. She learned the timing of their silences. She learned when to speak and when to disappear. She understood, clearly, that if she moved first, she could sometimes prevent something worse. The house changed its habits. Dinner was no longer at the same hour. Maggie forgot to light the lamp. Jasper forgot to hang his coat. Small things slipped, then stayed gone. That day, Jasper came home before the day was done. The light through the front window lay flat and pale on the floorboards. Mabel stood at the wash basin with her sleeves rolled, working at a shirt that had already given up what it would. The latch lifted, the door opened. She heard his boots and then nothing, the way a room goes quiet when someone stops inside it and does not move. He stood just past the threshold with his lunch pail in his hand. He looked at the chair by the stove before he looked at her. Maggie sat there with her head tipped back. Her hair had come loose. One shoe lay on its side near the hearth. Her hands rested open on her lap. The shelf above her was bare where the bottle had been. Not even the ring remained. Jasper walked to the shelf and touched the wood, slow, as if checking a wound. He turned back. "Maggie," he called. She did not answer. Her mouth moved once. Her eyes slid toward him without settling. Maggie. He called his wife again. She laughed. A short sound that broke into a cough. "You're back early. They sent me home," he said. "Where is it?" She shifted in the chair. "Where's what?" "Don't." Jasper closed his eyes for a moment. His patience stretched thin. She smiled at that. "Maybe your mind took it." His jaw tightened. He stepped closer. "You finished it." "It was meant to last," he said. "I told you that." Maggie's shoulders lifted in a small shrug. "You tell me a lot of things." He reached down and took her by the forearm. "Stand up," he said. She tried to pull away. She knocked her knuckles against the wood and hissed. He held on. He brought her to her feet, not lifting, not gentle. She swayed. "Stand," he said. Her hand came up and brushed his cheek. It did not land clean. His head turned anyway. His voice rose, sharp enough to cut the room. "You can't keep doing this," he said. "You can't sit here and rot and drag us with you." Mabel moved. She stepped between them and reached for her father's wrist. "Stop," she said. "Let go of her." He looked at her then. The tiredness in his eyes was not from work. He did not release Maggie. "She needs to stand," he said. "She needs to stop taking that poison." "She can't," Mabel said. "She's not well. Just let her sit." Jasper shifted his feet to keep Maggie upright. Mabel tightened her hold and tried to pull his hand away. Her shoulder hit his chest. The chain at his vest caught. The golden watch slid from his pocket. It struck the floor near the stove. The glass breaking into a clean spiderweb. The sound was small, final. Then the room went quiet. Jasper picked it up, let it rest in his palm longer than necessary, then slid it back into his pocket. He straightened and looked at Mabel. "You're no different from your mother." Mabel tried to speak, but nothing came. "You only break things," he said. Jasper turned away. He took his coat from the nail and reached for the small bag he kept folded in the trunk. He laid it on the table and packed without searching. A shirt, socks, his kit, tobacco. "Pop, where are you going?" Mabel asked. He did not answer. He stepped onto the porch and closed the door. He did not look back. Maggie's eyes were clear now, sharp with blame. "Look what you did," she said. "You drove him off. I tried to stop him. You always try." Maggie leaned forward. "He left because he couldn't stand you." Mabel swallowed. She looked at the empty shelf. "He'll come back," she said. Maggie didn't soften. "Go find your old man. I need my medicine. Don't you dare coming back without it." Mabel put her coat on and opened the door. The road held only light and dust. Late in the evening, after the light had thinned and the house had settled into its usual quiet, Mabel returned home empty-handed. She never found her father. Maggie was in the chair, the bottle tipped on its side at her feet. She watched as Mabel tried to cross the room without making a sound, her eyes tracking too closely. "Did you find anything?" "Where is your father?" she asked. Mabel stopped. "No, I am so sorry. Mom." Maggie stood up too fast. The chair scraped the floor. Her face changed as she stared at Mabel. "What did I tell you?" Mabel shook her head. Then she felt the slap before she even saw it was coming. Maggie grabbed Mabel's wrist. Her fingers dug in. "Your father," Maggie said. Her breath smelled sharp. "He is not gonna come back, is he?" "I don't know, Mom." "How can I know?" Mabel's voice trembled. Maggie's grip tightened. Mabel felt the pulse in her own hand jump. She did not pull away. Because, as always, a sudden movement only made things worse. "Get a job." Maggie let her hand fall, her fingers flexing as though they no longer belonged to her. She didn't apologize. She turned back to the chair. "I can't stand your useless face without my medicine," she said, sinking down before Mabel could answer. Mabel found the boarding house because it was still open. Most buildings on the main road had already given up. Doors were shut even in daylight. Signs stayed in place only because no one bothered to take them down. The boarding house kept its windows uncovered and its stove burning. Samuel Farrell listened while she stood in front of the counter and told him what she could do. She spoke plainly. Cooking, cleaning, laundry. Samuel looked at her hands, rough and cracked, and then at her face. He nodded. He knew well what kind of problem a girl like Mabel was facing. "You'll work mornings and evenings. And more if needed," he said. "You can eat when there are leftovers. I'll pay you when I have it." She agreed without hesitation. She finally found a familiar rhythm in her daily life. She rose before the guests and stayed awake after them. She scrubbed floors, carried water, changed sheets, and kept the kitchen moving. The labor was intensive but straightforward. She brought most of her pay straight home. Maggie waited for it with impatience that turned sharp when the bottle ran low. For a few hours after, Maggie softened. Then the edge returned. Mabel did not argue and stayed out of the way. The marks showed anyway. Sometimes on her arms, sometimes on her face. She covered what she could. When she could not, she worked with her head down. Samuel noticed the swelling along her cheek one morning and said nothing. The work he gave Mabel was the kindness that he thought should be enough. Another day, when her lip was split and she came in late, he stopped her near the kitchen door. "Wash up," he said. "Don't let the guests see you like that." She nodded and went to the basin. The boarding house was filled with men who stayed briefly and left without looking back. Some were miners passing through, some were gamblers. Some worked on contract and did not speak about it. They paid, ate, slept, and moved on. Raymond was different only in that he returned. He stayed when he was in town and left when his work called him elsewhere. He paid on time and kept to himself. He did not drink much. He always chose a seat where he could see the door. He never asked questions, and people didn't ask questions about him anymore. A half-Apache man who rode in and out of town wasn't that strange to the folks. The first time he noticed Mabel was in the yard. He saw her hands first. They were red past the knuckles. The skin split in places where soap and cold had worked together too long. She kept them in the water anyway, lifting cloth, wringing it out, lowering it again without pause. The water in the washtub steamed and cooled at the same time. Raymond watched her for a moment before speaking to Samuel. "She does all the washing herself," he said. Samuel shrugged. "She gets it done. She's a good worker, never complains." "But it's cold," Raymond replied, Samuel's jaw set. "No one's making her. If you don't like how I run things, you're welcome to stay elsewhere. And by the way, let me remind you, don't involve yourself in matters that ain't yours." Samuel continued. Raymond said nothing more and went back inside. Weeks later, Raymond returned. Mabel noticed him because he did not look like the others. Most men in the boarding house carried the town on them. Dust in their cuffs, drink in their breath, noise in the way they sat. Raymond came in quietly and stayed that way. He did not look like anyone she knew, but he did not look strange either. There was something familiar and misplaced at the same time. She wondered if his mother had been born nearby and his father somewhere else, or the other way around. The thought came and went without her meaning it to. When he looked at her, it was brief and direct. He ate quietly, paid without comment, and did not linger. When he left the table, the space he vacated stayed empty longer than it should have. Mabel went back to her work, but she remembered him anyway. Raymond stopped when he saw Mabel again. In the kitchen, there was a bruise on her cheek, fresh enough to catch the light. "Did someone hit you?" he asked. "Directly." She looked up. No, the road was slick. Of course, Raymond's question brought Mabel back to the previous night, when she asked her mother if she could stop using the medicine too often, even if just for temporary. And Maggie left her response on Mabel's cheek. Raymond did not press her. He reached into his coat pocket and took out a small tin. He set it on the counter between them. The metal was warm from his body. "For swelling," he said. "It helps." She hesitated. "I don't have money." He shook his head. "I'm not selling." She took the tin, her fingers light, as if it might be taken back. "Thank you." Samuel saw them from the doorway. His voice cut through the room. "Raymond, this is the last time I warn you. Mind your own business." Raymond's face did not change. "I handed her a salve." "You handed her trouble," Samuel said, uncalmly. "People notice things. You stay here, and now you start getting involved. That's how troubles come to me. Big boy." Raymond looked at Mabel, then back at Samuel. "She's hurt." Samuel's jaw tightened. "And that ain't your concern," Samuel went on. "For the last time, if you don't like how this house is run, you don't have to stay. That's the end of it." Raymond left the kitchen without another word. The boarding house was half full, the quiet hour between breakfast and the return of men who did not work regular shifts. Mabel was in the front room, wiping the table nearest the window. That was when Maggie arrived. The door flew open hard enough to rattle the glass in the front window. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Someone swore under his breath. Mabel was carrying a tray from the kitchen and nearly dropped it when she heard her name, sharp and loud, a voice she knew too well. "Mabel." Maggie stood in the doorway, one hand braced against the frame, the other clenched tight. Her hair was loose, hanging in uneven strands around her face. Hunger in her eyes made Mabel's stomach tighten. "Mabel," Maggie called again, louder. "Don't pretend you don't hear me." Samuel Farrell moved from behind the counter. "You can't come in here like this," he said. His voice was firm, practiced. Maggie ignored him. She stepped farther inside, scanning the room until she spotted Mabel near the kitchen door. "There you are," she said. "Hiding. I should have known." Mabel took a step forward. "Mama," she said, "please, not here." Maggie laughed, short and sharp. "Not here. You think I walked all this way to whisper?" Heads turned. The men at the tables watched openly now. No one pretended to eat. "You think I don't know what you've been doing," Maggie said. "Working. Keeping money from me. Standing there like you're better than me." "I gave it to you," Mabel said. "Every time." "That was before," Maggie snapped. "That was before you decided to keep some back." Mabel shook her head. "I don't have anything." Maggie surged forward. Samuel stepped between them. "Hands up." "That's enough," he said. "You take this outside." Maggie shoved him aside with surprising force. "Don't touch me," she shouted. "This is between me and my daughter." Her eyes locked onto Mabel again. "Where is it?" she demanded. "Where's the money?" Mabel stood still, her heart hammered. "There is no money." Maggie's face twisted. "Don't lie to me. I'm not." Maggie's hand came up, shaking. "You think I don't feel it?" she said. "You think I don't know what it's like when it's gone? My hands won't stop. My head won't stop. And you stand there telling me there's nothing." Her voice rose with each word. "You owe me." Raymond stepped out from the stairwell before Mabel realized he was there. He neither touched Maggie nor raised his voice. Instead, He stepped between them and stood his ground. She said, "She doesn't have it," he said. Maggie looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. Then she smiled. "And who are you supposed to be?" she asked. Her keeper Raymond did not answer. Maggie leaned closer, her face inches from his chest. "You got money," she said. "I can see it on you. Men like you always do." Raymond met her eyes. "You're not getting it from her." Maggie's smile vanished. Her voice dropped low and thick. "Then you'll give it to me." Her attention never left Raymond. "You hear me," she said. "I need it. I need it now." Raymond reached into his coat. He pulled out $50 and held it out. Maggie lunged. She snatched the money and clutched it to her chest, her fingers digging into the paper. "There," Raymond said. "That's all." Maggie laughed, breathless and wild. "That'll do," she said. "That'll do just fine." Then she turned and was gone, the door slamming behind her. Silence fell hard. Samuel looked at Raymond, then at Mabel. His face had gone pale, then hard. "That's it," he said. "Both of you." Mabel's mouth opened. "Mr. Farrell?" "No," he said. "I won't have this house turned into a stage for madness." Raymond nodded. "Understood." Samuel pointed toward the door. "I want both of you out of here, now." Mabel moved without thinking. Samuel opened the door and stood aside. "Don't come back." They stepped out into the light together. The door closed behind them, firm and final. Mabel stood on the step, and the sound left her. Her shoulders shook. She bent forward, hands on her knees, and cried. Raymond waited. When she finally straightened, he spoke. "We need shelter," he said. She wiped her face. "My mother. She won't survive alone." He looked at her steadily. "Do you want to go back?" Her mind went blank. She tried to find an answer, but had none. They rode out of town without looking back. They did not stop because of a plan. The horse slowed when the ground changed and Raymond led it. He guided it off the trail where the brush grew thicker and the slope rose enough to break the wind. He dismounted first, checked the girth, then stepped aside so Mabel could slide down. Her legs gave a little when they touched the ground. She stood until they steadied. Raymond gathered wood without looking at her. He chose pieces that would catch fast and burn low. The fire took with a soft crack and settled into itself. He fed it once more and then sat back on his heels, hands resting on his knees. Mabel stayed where she was, close enough to feel the heat, far enough not to crowd it. Her coat was dusty from the ride. Her hair had come loose again. She tried to smooth it and stopped halfway through, letting it fall where it wanted. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now," she said. Raymond watched the fire. "You don't have to think tonight." She nodded, though that was not what she had meant. She pressed her palms together, then opened them toward the heat. "I thought leaving would feel like relief," she said. "But why don't I feel it at all?" She paused, but he did not say anything. "I keep thinking about the door," she went on. "The sound it made when it shut. I didn't turn around. I don't know why that feels wrong." She let out a breath and leaned forward. The fire shifted and a spark lifted, then died. "Thank you," she said, "for stepping in, for not letting it keep going." He shrugged. "Small. I did what I could." He picked up a stick and pushed it into the coals. "I am not a good person. I don't always do the right thing." She watched his hands. The scars were old. Some had faded to pale lines. Others had not. "But you did better than most," she said. He looked up then. The firelight cut across his face and left the rest in shadow. "You don't know me," he said. Silence settled again. After a while, she spoke without looking at him. "I keep trying, and I keep waiting," she said finally, "for someone to tell me I did the wrong thing." Raymond nudged a stick into the coals. "Who?" She shook her head. "Anyone. Now, I don't know whether I've been helping my mother all this time or helping myself so that she'll leave me alone." The fire cracked softly. "When my father left," she said. "He didn't shout. He didn't explain. He said one thing and walked out. I've been trying to understand ever since if he really meant it. Then, or if he just needed a reason to leave." Raymond did not answer right away. He sat with his forearms resting on his knees, looking into the fire as if it were something that could answer back. "Men don't leave because of one moment," he said. "They leave because they're already gone." She swallowed. "Then why does it feel like I pushed him? Because they have nobody else to blame it on." She nodded once. Her eyes stayed on the flame. "I kept thinking if I could just hold things together, they would stop falling apart." "They don't," he said. The fire dropped lower. He added another piece of wood. "You know," she said, "when you stepped in today, it wasn't the money. It was the way you stood there. You didn't look at her like she was something you had to fix. That woman didn't want to be fixed," he said. "She waited. I grew up learning where I wasn't wanted," he said. "I learned fast when to move and when to stay quiet. My mother had another name for me," he said then. "What was it?" she asked. "Hashke." The sound stayed between them. "She used it when she wanted me to remember who I was," he said. "Before I started working for people who paid me to forget." Mabel's fingers curled into the fabric of her skirt. "Do you think it's still yours?" He stared into the coals. "I don't know. I haven't let it be." She shifted closer to the fire. "I think you don't let yourself be much of anything." He looked at her then, sharp, assessing. "And what do you let yourself be?" The question caught her off guard. She thought of the house, the door, the sound it made. "Someone who stays," she said, "until it becomes impossible." "That's just one way of suffering," he said. "Maybe you are right," she said. They sat with that. After a while, she spoke again, her voice quieter. "When you gave her the money, I knew I couldn't stay, even if you hadn't been there." Raymond nodded. "I know. You didn't rescue me," she said. "You made it clear. That's usually all there is," he said. The night pressed in around them, close but not heavy. The horse shifted and settled. The fire had gone out on its own. What remained was a bed of gray ash and a single piece of wood that still held warmth at its center. Raymond nudged it with his boot and watched the glow fade. He did not add more. The sky had begun to change in a way that did not need help. Mabel sat wrapped in her coat, knees drawn up, her back against the rock. She had not slept, but she did not feel as though she had stayed awake either. The ache in her shoulders had settled into something dull and familiar. When she stood, her legs complained and then steadied. The light came slowly. It did not arrive with color at first, only shape. The line of the ridge sharpened. The brush took form. The horse lifted its head and stamped once, then went still again. Raymond checked the saddle and tightened the straps. His movements were careful, practiced. When he finished, he rested his hand on the horse's neck for a moment, then stepped back. "I used to think staying was the hard part," Mabel said. "That leaving was what weak people did. And now," he said, "now I know that staying can be another way of giving up," she said. "You just don't have to pack. When I take work," Raymond went on, "I tell myself it's simple. Someone pays. I do what's asked. But yesterday you helped me realize something. After a moment, he spoke again. That I've been doing meaningless things, even hurtful things, calling it necessary. I think it's time to move, Mabel said. Forward. Raymond reached for the reins. All right. If we go together. She smiled, small and unguarded, and let the moment stand without naming it. And they went on the journey. A journey that Mabel did not know where and when it would end yet. All she had in mind was that. Maybe she was too selfish. That guilt would cling to her soul and her heart for a long while, but perhaps the heavier burden was knowing she had not left. She left with a wounded soul and a wounded body. And the unknown journey she chose would give her some time to heal. Everyone carries their own wounds. Maggie, perhaps, was no different. And when a person stands at a crossroads, when they must choose between honoring someone else's pain or finally allowing themselves a single, honest breath of freedom, are they required to feel selfish? Did Maggie believe she had been selfish for choosing what she wanted instead of choosing Mabel? Just as Mabel had once chosen to leave instead of staying, I wonder if selfish is a word we have burdened with too much judgment. Regardless of circumstance, I have spent a long time thinking about what might come next for Mabel. There are so many possible paths. I find myself asking what she would do, especially when she has never truly learned how to recognize her own happiness. She had lived a life shaped by quiet obedience, believing that it was enough simply to be present, to do what was asked of her. And I wonder what you think of Raymond's words. That we cannot help those who do not wish to be helped. That we cannot mend someone who has no desire to change. Even when that person is our first love. Even when they are the ones who taught us how to believe in love in the very first place.